the America First movement is actually going to hurt American power in the world rather than help it, because what has been the greatest strength of the United States in the post-war era has been its leadership of a team of like-minded nations. In recent years, there's no question that the United States has regressed rather than progressed in its democratic institutions. The second Trump administration in particular has been marked by a number of negative developments, from official corruption to the use of personal power by the president in all sorts of areas, such as the weaponization of justice, the use of personal attacks on enemies, and things like that, the attempt to restrict the democratic franchise in various ways. So all these are worrisome developments in the direction of what has been called illiberal democracy. You could see it heading towards ultimately the kind of restrictions on democratic procedures that you saw in Orban's Hungary. But it's, I think, worth pointing out those trends have not gone all that far yet, and they could still be reversed. And so the changes that have occurred are still temporary changes that have not yet been validated by electoral reforms on a broad scale. The public has not approved them, and they haven't been institutionalized. And so you could still imagine the United States recovering from its democratic recession and bouncing back. But that remains to be seen. And it's certainly true that the institutions and the checks and balances have been less robust, and the institutions have been less resilient than many have expected. And so at this point, what's really holding things together are in part the courts, but also in particular the threat or the possibility of future elections, which might do the same for American illiberal democracy that the Hungarians just did to Orban's version. So we'll have to see what happens. The trends aren't good, but on the other hand, there's a lot of opposition and a lot of discontent with the current trends, and so they may ultimately be reversed. U.S. power in the world has actually been remarkably constant over a very long period of time, roughly a quarter of global GDP. It hasn't actually declined relative to the system overall. Whereas, for example, European or Japanese power in the overall system has declined, even as they may have grown absolutely in relative terms. Other regions have grown stronger, and China has certainly risen. But the U.S. has declined in recent years, not because of an absolute power decline, as so much as the rise of other countries and regions, and then the U.S. response to that rise of the rest, which is, instead of sharing power or deeply institutionalizing its liberal international order, it's acted in a kind of truculent way, particularly under Trump, and kind of trying to overturn the apple cart. And the America First movement is actually going to hurt American power in the world rather than help it, because what has been the greatest strength of the United States in the post-war era has been its leadership of a team of like-minded nations, starting with the North Atlantic countries, but adding Japan and various others. And then after 89 and 91, when the Eastern Bloc collapsed, spreading the American system and the American order to much of the world at large. And the fact that the United States is now turning its back on that order and trying to essentially turn inward and cut trade ties and be more aggressive with others and not respect its allies. All that is actually in the long run self-defeating, because what has made the United States so powerful is not just its own individual power, but its ability to mobilize a group of like-minded nations by arguing that it is playing the game on behalf of the team at large rather than for itself alone. And so right now you have a strange situation in the international system with a kind of realist base of individual nations operating under anarchy, like you've always had, but you've had a liberal international order superimposed on top of that, a kind of cooperative agreement by a number of countries to cooperate for mutual benefit. And that is what has marked much of the post-war era. And now, with Donald Trump at the top, you have a realist layer at the very top, because he doesn't believe in that order. And it's not clear whether Trump will be able to dissolve the order, or whether he himself will be both constrained by it and ultimately rejected by it, and which the United States goes back. So there's a very fluid moment in international politics right now in which it's unclear what the future will be like. And it's not really one that is driven by American decline. Often is talked about this way, but I don't think it's about that. It's really more about American sense of purpose in the system overall. Because if the United States could bring itself to adapt its order to the new circumstances, it could still manage to keep the order going. It has enough power to be able to do the things it needs to do. And if it could convince others to come along with positive attraction rather than simply negative threats, it could resuscitate the order. But that's going to be a difficult task after Donald Trump. And the challenge now is surviving the Trump years and then rebuilding some sense of cooperative order afterwards. And we'll have to see how that goes. The story of the second Trump administration has not just been one of incredible agency and action on the part of the president, taking the country and the world in the direction he and only he wants it to go. But it's also been one of growing resistance to that. And the question that will be answered in November with the congressional elections is whether the American public fundamentally agrees with and supports what Trump has been doing at home and abroad, or whether they want to see a sea change. It's not clear that his own base, the MAGA movement, is all that dissatisfied. They have seemed prepared to stick with him regardless. But he didn't come to power with just the MAGA base behind him. He also brought along a lot of independents and people who were dissatisfied with the Democrats. And so the question will be not just, is MAGA going to desert him? Because the answer to that seems to be no. But will other Americans who are unhappy with what he's been doing in various spheres, will enough of them find the Democrats acceptable and therefore vote Congress into Democratic hands in the fall, which could provide a check on the Trump administration's actions? And then if there was a Democrat elected in 2028, if you could reverse some of the moves that he has made. This is all still possible. American democracy is still lively and vibrant and thriving, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. We just saw in Hungary that even after a 16-year attempt to deeply institutionalize Orban's illiberal democracy, enough popular support existed to vote him out of office and make him willing to concede. And that could ultimately happen in the United States as well in 2026 and 2028. But whether the American public chooses to go in that direction, we'll just have to see.